Hey guys, how's it going? Comparing you. So, after playing Hearthstone for as much as I have, I've kind of realized the trend. Yeah, I lose a decent amount of games. Last few days haven't done so well in Arena, but most of the time, when I lose, it's either a pretty close game in the late game, or sometimes not so much. But typically, when it isn't like a back and forth late game kind of finish, it's kind of like an execution. And this type of scenario happens pretty much on turn 2. So turn 2 can be turn 1 if you go second, and for a rogue that's pretty important. But pretty much what I'm getting at is that there are a few creatures that you can play on your second turn, or on your first if you are the player going second, that you can drop that will, if they're not dealt with, will immediately win you the game. And I'll show you guys a few pics of the cards that I'm talking about here. First is the Defias Ringleader. This is the Scrub. This is probably the most bullshit move in the game. When you face a rogue, although rogues pretty much are top dog right now, they're probably not going to lose anyway. But if they happen to go second, and if they happen to go second and coin, which counts as a spell which triggers the combo, they can get a 2/3 and a 2/1 creature on their first turn. And typically when they do this, you pretty much just lose. The reason is, it's like, yeah, you might be able to deal with maybe one of the creatures. You're not going to be able to deal with both the creatures that early on. So you're always going to take a good amount of damage. And if you are playing something like a priest or something like that that has no innate ability, their power is not going to help them against that. You're pretty much starting the game with like an 8 to 12 life disadvantage against the rogue, and a rogue is pretty much a class that will just try to burn you down. It's their life versus your life, and that's all it is. It has very little to do with other dynamics in the game. It's a very straightforward kind of play that, makes sense. The other drops in question are the Pint Sized Summoner and the Buzzard. The Pint Sized Summoner, everyone can play this because it's a neutral card. It's not rogue only like the Defias, and it's not hunter only like the Buzzard. The Pint Size, the reason why it's so insane is that, turn 1 you can do a Pint Size, which is essentially 2 mana, but if you go second, turn 1, it'd be 1 mana and then a coin. And then turn 2, you have 2 mana, and you have 2 mana left. If you drop like a 1/7 taunt, or some other kind of taunt creature that won't die, you can essentially perpetuate the game to where you're 2 turns ahead of your opponent, and you're always casting, ridiculous creatures. So in this kind of matchup, you're probably just going to win straight up. And when I'm doing Arena, when I'm just, picking whatever cards, I typically go for Pint Size just because I know if I have one, I'll probably win 1 or 2 of my games just because of that card, and just because of the crazy amount of cheese involved with playing it early on in the game. The Buzzard is not quite as overpowered as the other two, but the same kind of effect can perpetuate from the Buzzard. If they drop a Buzzard on turn 2 and you can't really do anything to it, you're going to start dropping hyenas, you're going to start dropping other creatures, and they're amassing a card advantage. And what tends to happen is, even if you clear their board, they're going to have more cards. It just keeps going, keeps going, keeps going. And the Hunter, while not quite as aggressive as the Rogue, has the same concept to where, they can have the option to directly attack you because, if they can deal an early amount of damage, especially if they have cards in hand, they can kill command you later on, they can hero ability, and eventually you'll probably lose the game if you don't deal with the Buzzard early on. So what happens is, when I'm constructing an arena deck, obviously this is from my perspective, but I think it's a fairly accurate one. A part of the deck deals with countering this bullshit set of cards. And this is also why I feel the Rogue is actually very overpowered compared to the other classes, just because of their class ability. Their class ability allows them to deal with these creatures in time. So how does that work? Well, let's say you go second on a rogue, and let's just say you got unlucky and you don't have a scrub, you don't have a Defias Ringleader in your hand. Well, what you can do is you can coin to pop your dagger and not attack with it. And then, they can play a Pint Sized Summoner, well, then you buff your dagger and you kill the pint-sized summoner. So what actually took place is, they lost their summoner, and you didn't even lose a card. It's just a class ability. So the rogue ability has this sort of automatic denial, where if you have a 1-life creature or a 2-life creature, you're probably just not even going to bother playing it. So, the druid has a similar effect. The paladin has kind of a similar effect. They're 1/1s, but it's not quite as strong. A druid can't take care of a 2-life creature right off the bat without using a card. And the paladin has 1/1 creatures, which technically do 1 damage, but on the other side of things, if it's a paladin facing a rogue, the rogue can always easily counter the 1/1 creatures. So the idea that happens is the rogue just gets his shit for free, Any 2-drop, oh, pint-sized summoner? What a fucking joke. You just kill that shit. Where all the other guys, they have to put in crap in their deck. Like when I make a priest deck, I have to put in like 1 or 2 holy smites. 1 mana for 2 damage and a card, right? So imagine that, right? I'm playing a priest. Not only can I not use my class ability in the first like 4 or 5 turns because it doesn't do anything, and even when I can cast it to gain 2 life, who cares? The game is won and lost right at the beginning. Right at the beginning, it determines who has the board advantage. There are board clears, but when it comes to arena, they're not very frequent. And as a result, the first 2 turns, maybe the first 3 even, will dictate the rest of the game and will dictate the winner or loser right off the bat. And if you don't have the cheese cards, and if you don't have the anti-cheese cards, and if you don't have the cheesy class ability, you might be out of luck, and you might be facing a crushing loss yet again. So that's the kind of dynamic that I feel shouldn't exist in Hearthstone. But it's one that, kind of frustrates me more than any other. So I thought I'd share his, maybe you guys can see into this. Maybe you guys can, come up with some way to counter this. But all in all, I feel that perhaps, the game being in the beta stage that it's in, perhaps things will change. And perhaps, maybe they'll get rid of the fucking Defias ringleader bullcrap, because the rogues absolutely don't need it. The buzzard, alright, it's the least cheesy of the 3. And the pint-sized, maybe it shouldn't cost 2 mana. I mean, it is a summoning portal after all. So, some pretty interesting stuff. Hope you guys learned something. I'll see you guys tomorrow.